Some big movements and developments in the war in Ukraine. Of course, ground zero for a lot of this planning and a lot of this messaging is coming straight out of Poland. President Biden in Poland drawing red lines around NATO, making new demands as to where NATO will go in the future. All of that as we also see new clampdowns on speech inside of Poland. What is actually happening to this country as we've been reporting, really collapsing under the weight of this war. Mike Krupa is a columnist, historian, host of Votum TV. He's been covering this story deeply, and he's joining us today from Poland. Mike, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Clayton. Thanks for having me.
So first, to President Biden, who, of course, in Poland, making this big speech about NATO. How was this received? What was your response to seeing the president make these new NATO statements?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't think we heard anything new from President Biden. I think he was just repeating the same old from the last year about how the world supposedly is united behind NATO and the United States, about how Russia is failing, about how Putin is not realizing his goals in Ukraine. So all this stuff, all the self-assuring boilerplate that we've been hearing during the last year of the conflict in Ukraine, which basically amounts to, in essence, signaling of weakness on the part of the West, because the most important parts of what happened in the last few days in Poland and Ukraine are the stuff that wasn't said. And I'd like to quote here from a Reuters report, I think it was from yesterday or the day before. This was just after Biden concluded his remarks in Poland. This is from a Reuters report. I quote, "One U.S. official who requested anonymity to speak candidly about U.S. support for the war said the administration has told the Ukrainian government that U.S. resources are not infinite. I quote, everybody understands that this war has to end at some point, and we all would like to see it end sooner rather than later," the official said, end quote. So that's the part of the speech that Biden obviously didn't say in his high-flying rhetoric in Warsaw. The other interesting part is what Jake Sullivan admitted to during his interview. I think it was with CBS.
Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Where he threw basically cold water on all those, lofty statements that basically reported by all the Western mainstream media that Biden's visit in Kiev was a surprise to Putin. It was a blow to Putin. Well, all of a sudden we have Jake Sullivan talking with CBS News, and I'd just like to quote extensively from this statement again. Sullivan said, "We did notify the Russians that President Biden would be traveling to Kiev." He went on to say, "We did so some hours before his departure for deconfliction purposes. And because of the sensitive nature of those communications, I won't get into how they responded or what the precise nature of our message was, but I can confirm that we provided that notification," end quote. So it's interesting because the Polish mainstream media on Monday, everybody in the morning was going crazy that, this is poking a finger in the bear's eye, that, Biden upstaged Putin with this surprise visit. And then quietly in the background, we have this statement by Sullivan, obviously timed at the right time so that people will get the message after the fact that no, this was agreed with the Russians. And we can only expect that their answer was a positive one, whereby they said, we'll guarantee your security. I mean, the fact that the CNN reporter was in Kiev on that day and the air raid sirens went on when nothing was exploding in Kiev and no missiles were flying, he actually said he was somewhat surprised that all the air raid sirens began when when Biden and Zelensky made their stroll on the Kiev streets. So as I said, it's propaganda.
Of course it's propaganda, right? There was no threat. They knew about it. They're not, and of course, he's the greatest danger to humanity, right? And we gave him a phone call, let him know that we're flying in. So go continue to make pancakes with Xi Jinping. Don't worry about it. We're going to be fine about that. So yeah, it's all propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is that, supposedly serious people are taking this seriously, which is hilarious in and of itself. But as I said, it's all theater, it's comedy. There's nothing new here. And I just want to reiterate, because this might have been a Freudian slip on the part of the Polish president, but when he was introducing Biden before his speech in front of the Royal Castle in Warsaw, the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, made the slip where he said, basically, I'm not quoting directly here, but he said that Ukraine stands today thanks to the bravery of the Russian soldiers. So a lot of people pointed that out later, that it was obviously a mistake. But in a way, I mean, he is telling the truth, because if this was a full-fledged war, if it wasn't for the Russians, I mean, I don't think Zelensky would either be alive or he'd be probably hiding out somewhere in Miami. So in essence, he did speak a certain truth about the situation in Ukraine.
So since we last spoke a couple of weeks ago in January, we were talking about the crushing weight of this war on the Polish people and how the Polish people really aren't getting the actual truth about what's been unfolding. Obviously, politicians, they're continuing to push weapons and money and resources into Ukraine. And while millions of Ukrainian refugees have been moving into Poland, it's amazing because, and I want to get your update on all of that. Where does Poland stand today, and what was the reaction of Biden's visit? But first, a number of people who are watching our show who were uninformed about this said, no, there's not, that's all fake news. There's not a lot of Ukrainian refugees going into Poland. They've been hearing this secondhand, to which other Polish viewers of our show have said, no, it's millions of Ukrainian refugees. So what is the truth? Do we have a current number on the number of Ukrainians living in Poland?
Well, the ones that we're apparently officially supporting is 1.4 million Ukrainians that the Polish state is directly financing. So these are supposed refugees, although I would point out that the vast majority of them have not put in papers for refugee status, but they're just considered refugees because they left as a result of the Russian invasion. So that 1.4 million are being supported directly by the Polish government. And to those detractors, who say this is all fake news, that this is not happening. I mean, I've read comments on our last interview also that, what is he talking about? Well, come to Poland, go have a stroll in Warsaw, in Wrocław, in Kraków, in any of the major Polish cities, and ask yourself if you hear Polish on the streets, or are you starting to hear, or you're hearing on the same level, basically, more Russian or Ukrainian. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It can't be denied. So seeing is believing. To all those who say that we are not being Ukrainianized in Poland, just give us a visit. In terms of the situation, in a sense, it's getting worse because, as you probably noticed during Biden's speech in Warsaw, the entire stage was set and the entire royal castle, which is a symbol of Polish national identity, was lit up in the Ukrainian flag colors, which is pretty demeaning to a lot of Polish patriots who asked themselves, are we in Kiev or are we still in Warsaw? Because everything was basically directed in supposed solidarity with Ukraine. So, and I would guess, because a lot of people I've noticed were asking this on social media, are the polls so much in favor of Biden's war policy and so pro-American? Because the crowd, reacted very enthusiastically during the speech. Well, I wouldn't rule out the fact that about 60, maybe 70% of those who were present at that speech were actually Ukrainians. I'm not saying that's the case, but I wouldn't rule that out. Not Polish citizens, but recently arrived Ukrainians or Ukrainians who were here in the first place.
So the country of Poland clamping down on free speech, it wouldn't be surprising if, of course, that was all orchestrated and the mainstream media in Poland was showing effusive coverage of Biden's visit. I'm sure that was the case. You've written just a new piece on the clampdown on speech in that country. And so while NATO purports to be supporting democracy around the world, we're seeing example after example after example of democracy being eroded. Can you tell us about your latest piece and what Poland is doing around free speech and censorship?
Well, a few days ago, as I mentioned in my speech, which is up on Consortium News, Dr. Leszek Sikulski, who is a well-known commentator and expert in geopolitics, he actually served as an advisor to the National Security Bureau under President-elect Kaczynski, and he was also awarded, I'm not sure the title of the medal right now, but by our current president, Andrzej Duda, a few years back for his service in the field of national security. So Leszek Sikulski is a well-known, respected member of the Polish, I would even say in a way, national security commentariat, at least, if not establishment. And last year, he began voicing very uncomfortable opinions about how this is not Poland's war. We should not be engaging in pumping weapons into Ukraine, basically suggesting that we should take, the modest line of Viktor Orban, at least not engaging directly in a confrontation with Russia. But that unfortunately lined him up a huge list of enemies who began attacking him on social media. And also from the side of the Polish special services, we have this gentleman in Poland called Stanisław Żaden. He is the spokesperson for a sort of combined grouping of the Polish intelligence community. And he began attacking Sikulski, obviously using all the old, tropes that he's repeating Kremlin narratives, that he might be a Putin stooge and so on and so on. They started attacking him because Sikulski wrote books about Russia, that he interviewed Dugin. Oh my God, the crime to interview Alexander Dugin as part of writing a book. Shameful. So a few weeks ago, Dr. Sikulski launched what he called the Polish anti-war movement, which was supposed to become this civic platform for anti-war activism, uniting Poles in a cross-partisan way, whether from the left, the right, the center, or political agnostic, so to say. That was basically centered on the one message: this is not our war. We should not be engaging in pumping weapons into Ukraine. And we should not be the subservient agent of the United States in this part of Europe. So those are basically the three goals that were outlined. And as soon as that grouping was launched, Sikulski got word from the administration of the school the college that he was teaching in South Central Poland, that he will be fired because he is voicing views that are incompatible, and these are the words of the rector, with the Polish national interest. So the rector was giving a political opinion straight up about why he was firing a member of his faculty. It wasn't that he molested somebody. It wasn't that he was drunk while on campus. No, for strict political reasons. Now, Dr. Sikulski, I relate in that piece, also mentioned that he knows that there were calls from the Ministry of Education pressuring the school to let him go, as well as visits from members of the ruling party, Law and Justice. So this is a purely political decision. Now they're trying to shut down his YouTube channel using these insane apparent communication regulations whereby he is not registered with some board in Warsaw that has oversight on this. So they're literally doing everything they can to smear this man because he has come out against the war. But the good thing is more anti-war billboards are showing up in Poland, and more people are grouping around the anti-war movement and taking notice that there is a plurality of views on this issue in Poland, this issue of life and death in essence. And what we're hearing from the mainstream media is not the only viable and not the only, and far from being the only true narrative on this issue. So kudos to Leszek Sikulski for coming out with his initiative. And we're just beginning, as he said, we're just beginning. The expansion is just moving forward.
Well, it's encouraging to hear the growing sounds of the anti-war movement. I'm very encouraged by that. Of course, we just had the big Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C. Over the weekend. And of course, we're seeing another round of protests that are set to be scheduled, anti-NATO protests set to be hitting Europe in the very near future. So it sounds like this chorus is getting stronger. I'll get you out of here on this, Mike, which is about the Polish people. How are they doing right now? And how are they handling in this difficult winter when the country itself is, of course, funneling so many resources into Ukraine in a war that the people arguably don't want, although the mainstream media paints a different picture of that. How are they doing?
Well, thankfully, and I think this is due to many prayers that were sent to the Almighty in autumn, this winter was actually fairly soft, so to say. Yeah. So apparently we're going to have snow during the weekend, but I think this is just the dying, the last gasps of winter before spring settles in March. So thankfully, we didn't have the crisis that was anticipated by many, although if we did have a true Eastern European winter, it would have been a different story. Now, a lot of people are saying, a lot of analysts in the West, that the real problem from cutting off Russian gas supplies would not hit us this year, but next winter, right? Because we stocked on those gas supplies just before we announced that we're totally cutting ourselves off from the Russian cheap gas. So we'll see what happens. Right now, I think the main issue for a lot of Polish people, and I'm starting to notice this among people who would disagree with me even a few months back, which is very interesting, who are very pro-Ukrainian, pro-Kiev. In essence, a lot of them are also pro-war. They're changing their tune. People are saying that the cultural changes that this war has brought to Poland, with the huge influx of Ukrainians, the possible threats to national security and to our existence, in essence, are becoming more and more paramount. And the fact that we're sort of being positioned to be the second proxy after Ukraine, God forbid, is opening up a lot of eyes. So we're seeing the opposition grow. More and more people are opening their eyes, and thanks to alternative media sites like Redacted and a lot of others, they're getting information from the West that they're not getting from Poland. Even if they have to translate some segments of it, they still would rather hear something true than something made up and, just basically in a whole alphabet soup of propaganda.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that. That's certainly a positive sign, and we're starting to see that throughout Europe and the United States as well. So hopefully these voices get louder, and our viewers can share these stories, share this video out with other Polish-speaking viewers, maybe help translate it and get these messages out about what's actually happening. Mike, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for your great coverage there in Poland and continued great journalism. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.